Welcome to another episode of the Washington Retirement Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Meikle, and the goal of this podcast is to empower you guys to understand your retirement benefits better so you can utilize them to retire earlier, pay less in taxes, and ultimately get what you want out of this life. Today's episode, we're going over why your average rates of return really don't matter. So to give you guys some context before we dive into the main part of this podcast, I'm going to be talking about average rate of return. So if you ever look at the statement, they say the return was 5%, 6%. Those are what we call average return. We're actually going to dive into what that actually means and why it's different than a real return and why you should be looking at real returns, not average returns. Now, I do a screen share, so you're going to hear me reference look at the screen, kind of things like that. So these are one of those episodes that it's better to look at the video version instead of just the audio only. You might be a little bit lost, but if you're listening audio only, some things to know going into it is I'm always going to use a starting balance of $100,000. So I have two examples we're going to go over, but the starting balance is always going to be $100,000. Eventually, we're going to talk about S&P rates return. I'm looking at the year 2000 to the year 2018. That's when I initially did this recording. So those are the years I'm referencing when I say the average rate of return over that period of time. It's the year 2000 to 2018. Eventually, I'll get this updated to include 2025, but keep things flowing. I'm just going to use where I currently had recorded for you guys. Now, after we look at why average rate of returns really don't matter, the question that came up today was, how does early retirement impact my pension benefits? So I'll be diving deeper into that question after we talk about your average rates of return and why they don't matter. Now, if you haven't done so yet, the link in the description below will get you guys over to our new free community. On there, I have exclusive video content for you guys. It's in fact my first digital course that I'm currently working and rolling out as I'm recording them. So every week I'm dropping new videos into that platform. So feel free to join, tell your friends about it. But my goal is to get at least the first phase of it done before the end of this month. That way, any new hires coming into this next school year can get on there and at least get some context when they're going through their benefit package. What does it all mean? What benefits did I choose? So that's my plan for this. If you know of any new teachers coming up this school year, please share them this link so they can join and at least get some education on these benefits before making these decisions, which are irrevocable for many of them. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive right in. Let me walk you through why having a high average rate of return doesn't mean you're going to make any money. In fact, you can have a positive rate of return and still end up losing money. So this is actually going to be the first video in a series of different financial secrets I'm going to reveal to you. So average rate of returns is the industry standard when they measure how the performance on accounts do. So when you look at an account statement, you're researching funds online, you often seeing performance history, right? The average rate of return, how it did in the last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, etc. But it's important to remember that averages are exactly that. They're just an average. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the real return of the account. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's just take a look at this example here. All right, so on the screen here is just a little table we'll walk through. So let's say you had $100,000 starting off, and let's just say that your return 1 year is negative 20%. That means you had a loss of $20,000, and you ended up only having $80,000 at the end of that first year. Now, let's say in the second year, the market rebounds and you got back 20%, and now you had a 20% gain of that $80,000, which gave you $16,000. And so at the end of year 2, you're going to have $96,000. So you can see negative 20 plus 20 is a 0% rate of return. You're still down. In year 3, let's say you lost 60%. That would have been a loss of $57,000, bringing your total down to $38,000. And year 4, let's say the market doubled and you got 100% back. You bring your total up to $76,800. So again, average rate of return, you just take all of the returns, you sum them up and divide them by the number of years. So if we take negative 20 plus 20, we're at 0. Take away 60, we're at negative 60. Add 100 to that, we end up with a positive 40%. Divide over 4 years, that gives us an average rate of return of 10%. Most people would see that and say, hey, that's pretty good. But as you can see, now that I actually put numbers to it on the right-hand side here, the real return, even though we had an average return of 10%, we see that we ended up with $76,000, which means our real return was a negative 23.2%. So this is just one example of how average rates of returns can be misleading and doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be making any money. Now let's go ahead and apply the same logic to actual market performance. So let's go ahead and take a look at the S&P 500 and how that's done over the past few years. So here we have S&P 500. So what this chart is showing you is the actual rate of returns that the market has had since the year 2000. So you can see that we have in 2000, 2002, we have the dot-com bubble burst. Oh wait, we had the market crash again. If we had $100,000 starting off in the year 2000, and we invested it and kept it in the market until 2018, we would have ended up with $169,000. Now let's just take the average rate of return. We'll just take the sum of all this and divide it by the 19 columns here. So here we have a quick snapshot of how the market's actually performed. So you can see in 2000, we have that dot-com bubble burst. In 2008, we had the market crash again. So this is the actual performance of the S&P 500. So if we apply the average rate of return to this, and we just add up our columns here and divide it by the 19 rows we have here, it gives us an average rate of return of 4.4%. So that's all the market has done in the last 19 years. Much lower than what most people think it has. Remember, that's the average return. Now let's actually apply this to the actual return or the real return. So again, a real return, what we're going to be doing is just taking the $100,000 that we started off with. We look down the list and we see we end up with $169,000. So we do the math on it and calculate the actual gain that we got on that. And it's only 2.8%. So quite a bit lower than what we had when we just used the average return. But how much lower is it? It's a whole 36.3% less than what we thought we would have had using average rate of return. So you can see there's a very big difference between using average rate of return and actual rate of return. And this is something important to look for when you review your accounts with your advisor or look over your statements. You want to be seeing, are they showing me an average rate of return or my actual rate of return? Most times they are going to show you the real return, but it's just something to look for and ask about. All right, so on to today's question of the day. How does early retirement impact my pension benefits? So when it comes to your pension benefits and early retirement, essentially your pensions are always going to be reduced. So in Washington State, for most plans, at least TERS, PERS, CERS, age 65 is considered your full age. If you're in a different pension system, it could be as low as 55 or 53 in some cases. So whatever the full age is for your pension system, that's what they consider full retirement. Anything taken before that is considered early, and you get a reduced benefit. The exception to this rule is anyone retiring under the 2008 ERF, which you have to be retired, that you would have had to been hired prior to May 1st of 2013 and have more than 30 years physically worked in Washington State to qualify for this benefit. If you do, you can get your benefit as early as age 62 with no penalties. Now, it's still considered early retirement. They just don't assess a penalty for this. Now, before we keep going, it's important to understand the state's language here. When they say penalty, a lot of people get kind of scared with it. We don't like being penalized. It's a negative connotation to it. So if I said, if I retire at 60, there's a 5% penalty, a lot of people are like, oh no, I don't want to take a penalty. I don't want to give the state more money. I want all my money. So don't penalize me. I'll just wait till 62 to collect the full benefit. But these are the same people that will take their Social Security at 62, 65, and not understand that Social Security also has penalties, but they don't label them as penalties. They just say it's a reduced benefit, or they say, hey, your benefit at 62 is, $2,000. At 67, it's 3,000 or whatever it is. They just label off the income based on your age. They never say it's a penalty, but in reality it is. The earlier you get your benefit, technically you're going to be collecting it for longer, therefore they're going to pay you less. So you get, smaller payments, but potentially for a longer period of time. Same thing works with the state and their pension system, but they call it a penalty because they don't want you to take it early because they know they're going to be on the hook to pay you sooner and for a longer period of time. So they say these things are penalties. Now, when you compare Social Security and what they take versus the state, it's really no comparison at all. So if you took your penalty in Washington State at age 55, and let's assume you're in the 2008 ERF here, full benefits at 62, the earliest you could take it is 55, so you're taking it a full 7 years early, it's basically a 20% penalty or a reduction in your benefits. If you took your Social Security benefit at age 62, you're going to get hit with a 30% penalty. You're both getting these things early. In fact, the states, you're getting 7 years early and they're only taking 20%, or with Social Security, you're only taking it 5 years early and they're just taking 30%. So the reduction in Social Security is steeper than what the state assesses. Now, this is only for if you qualify for the 2008 ERF formula. Now, if you do not qualify for this formula, and let's say it's because you were hired after May 1st of 2013, or you just have less than 30 years of service in the system, your full benefit is age 65. Anytime you take your pension before that, you get assessed with a penalty. Now, the penalty is like 9% and change roughly, per year. So the difference between taking it at 65, the full benefit, and taking it at 64, you only get about 91%-ish of your payout. So they take about 9%. If you took it at 63, it's another 9%. So you only get like 81% of your benefit. It keeps going back like that over time. So if you wanted to take it at 55, in this example here, you'd essentially be left with half or even less than half of your benefit. So unless you have the 2008 ERF or there's some other reason, it usually doesn't make sense to be taking pensions incredibly early from the state. Now, is a 9% benefit really going to kill you? If it come down to it and you're at 64 and you're just like done, 9%, while it sounds high in the scheme of things, probably isn't too bad. Going beyond that though, it becomes a little bit harder to justify, unless there's other circumstances. But oftentimes if we're collecting benefits early, it's with people that are qualified for the 2008 ERF just because it's taking less of a penalty. And if you don't have those 30 years of service credits, it becomes a lot stickier. That doesn't mean you can't retire early. It just means you can't take your pension early. So oftentimes I'm working with somebody and they want to retire early from the state, but we do not have 30 years of service credits, or we got hired after May of 2013. We don't qualify for this benefit. What we're looking at here is retiring and not drawing the pension. So with Washington State, in their language, they use the word separate and retirement. Separate means I'm no longer working for the state. Retirement means I started my pension. Now, you can separate service from your employer, basically not work, and you could do something else. And as long as you don't retire or turn your pension benefit, there is no penalty. So at age 60, if you're like, hey, I want to go do something else, you go ahead and do that, and they're not going to penalize you because you're not drawing your pension yet. Penalties only apply when the pension is turned on or begins. So the overall lesson here is don't let the word penalties deter you from potentially taking it early. As long as you have the right context and know the break-even numbers, and depending on your situation, it could very well make sense. You may even break even sooner than you think. Now, using certain strategies, on average, we're helping clients retire a whole 930 days earlier than they thought possible. So if you're someone that is contemplating early retirement, you're not sure if it's possible, if it's for you, you need someone to talk through your numbers, your situation to see if it could be a reality, feel free to schedule a call with us. The link will be in the description below. Also, we have our free community group currently on School, so the link to join that is down below. I've got a few videos on there that are exclusively to the group to help you dive deeper into your amazing benefit packages, so you can have an even deeper knowledge than what I already provide through the podcast and YouTube channels. So feel free to join that. The link is in the description below. If you know a new teacher, please send them that link because it's going to be invaluable for them to get this type of knowledge this early on in their career, and they'll have you to thank for that. So be sure to share this link with all the new staff you guys have this year. And until next time, remember that your future depends on what you do today. All right, before I sign off, just a real quick legal disclosure that we're required to say as licensed fiduciary advisors. So remember that this is a podcast. It is designed for educational and entertainment purposes only. I don't know you personally, therefore I cannot give you any personal advice. So please don't take anything that we say on the show as being personal, financial, legal, or tax advice. If you want that kind of stuff, make sure you seek out a professional so they can help you with the strategies and investments that are right for you. Also, please remember that despite the name of our show, we are in no way associated with Washington State or the Department of Guidance Systems or any other Washington employer. We're a private-owned firm that specializes in working with Washington State employees, which is why we know so much about this stuff. So remember, we don't work for the state in any way, shape, or form. So please don't confuse us as being an official representative of the state. All right, that's it for the legal stuff. I'll catch you guys all next time.